Why do the foolish end up in power? Machiavelli knew it. It's a sobering question that echoes through history, politics, and society. Why do so many foolish individuals end up in positions of power? The truth is, it's not merely a matter of luck or coincidence. It is a phenomenon deeply rooted in human nature, societal dynamics, and the manipulation of perceptions. And as Niccolò Machiavelli, arguably one of history's most astute political minds, taught us centuries ago, power has little to do with virtue or wisdom. It often depends on manipulation, cunning, and exploiting human flaws. Machiavelli once famously explained that the character of men, for the most part, resembles one another more in their ambition and thirst for power than in their virtue or justice. This insight is more relevant today than ever before. It shows us that beneath the veneer of civility and modernity, many of those who ascend to leadership positions do so because they understand how to manipulate human weaknesses rather than solve problems or serve the common good. Throughout history, we have seen countless examples of leaders who gained power not through competence or wisdom, but through impulsiveness, greed, or sheer manipulation. These individuals often appeal to our basest instincts, fear, pride, ego, and thrive on the ignorance and complacency of the masses. They rely on half-truths, emotional appeals, and a lack of critical scrutiny, tools that exploit the very flaws Machiavelli identified. In democratic societies, we might believe that elections serve as a safeguard, a process that filters out the unfit and promotes the wise. But unfortunately, this is often an illusion. Elections tend to favor charisma over competence, popularity over integrity, and spectacle over substance. And what populates the corridors of power are often the individuals who understand how to exploit that system most effectively, regardless of their intelligence, virtue, or morality. This reality is not confined to any particular era or nation. It is a universal pattern etched into the fabric of political and social life. Leaders rise to power through conformance to societal flaws. They thrive on our collective ignorance, our appetite for quick solutions, and our tendency to follow loud voices rather than reasoned debate. So what does this say about us, about the society that allows such figures to flourish? It reveals our own vulnerabilities. It underscores the importance of self-awareness and collective vigilance. Because if we continue to elevate those who manipulate, rather than those who genuinely serve or lead with integrity, we confirm Machiavelli's harsh truth that power is often seized by the least deserving, those most adept at exploiting human weaknesses rather than uplifting society. This essay begins with a call to genuine awareness. To understand why foolish individuals often end up in power, we must examine the societal, psychological, and political mechanisms that facilitate this cycle. We need to recognize that the problem is systemic, embedded in our collective psyche and our institutions. Only then can we hope to address it, challenge it, and ultimately transform it. Comment below this sentence. Recognizing who really holds power is the first step towards societal change. Share your thoughts and reflect on how this applies to the leadership you see around you today. How ignorance and vanity drive foolish leaders to power. In the grand arena of politics and leadership, ignorance and vanity are often the fuel that propels the undeserving into positions of influence. To truly understand how the foolish ascend, we must examine the profound psychological undercurrents that make this possible. At its core, human nature craves recognition, validation, admiration, and a sense of importance. Vanity, the excessive pride in oneself, fuels a desire to be seen as successful, powerful, or extraordinary. Often, this desire is so overwhelming that it overrides rational judgment and self-awareness. Society has cultivated environments where superficial qualities, charisma, appearance, or confidence, often overshadow competence. As a result, individuals driven by vanity seek to elevate themselves, sometimes at any cost, including the manipulation of others and outright deception. But vanity alone cannot elevate someone to power. It works hand in hand with ignorance, an often overlooked yet pervasive flaw. Ignorance here isn't merely a lack of knowledge but a refusal, or inability, to recognize one's limitations, a stubborn blind spot that prevents genuine learning or growth. When combined, vanity tells an individual they are exceptional beyond measure, while ignorance assures them they require no further education or self-improvement. Many leaders who rise to power through these traits do so because they are adept at convincing others that they are the best choice, regardless of their actual qualifications. They project confidence, often bordering on arrogance, which fools not only their followers, but sometimes even themselves. They deny facts, dismiss expert advice, and cling to illusions of greatness. This belief in their own infallibility further feeds their arrogance, creating a dangerous cycle. The more ignorant they are, the more they believe they are capable of anything. This psychological pattern is not new. It has been observed throughout history. Leaders like Napoleon, Mussolini, and others displayed immense vanity, often to their peril. Their overconfidence, rooted in a lack of awareness of their limitations, contributed directly to their downfall. Yet, even in modern democracies, we see figures whose egocentric narratives overshadow factual reality. They manipulate truths to fit their self-image, convincing their followers and themselves that they are the ones who will solve all problems, when in fact, they are often the very cause of chaos. From a societal perspective, we often reward superficial qualities such as charisma, boldness, and confidence, traits that can easily mask a lack of understanding or integrity. Our media and culture elevate individuals who speak loudly or appear decisive, regardless of whether they possess the wisdom or moral integrity necessary for true leadership. This tendency creates a feedback loop. Society glorifies superficiality, which in turn encourages aspiring leaders to prioritize appearance over substance. The danger of this dynamic is profound. When leaders act driven by vanity, they neglect the complexities of governance. They dismiss expert consensus, ignore dissenting voices, and pursue grandiose plans rooted in their own self-image. Their decisions often lack foresight, wisdom, or a sense of genuine responsibility. Meanwhile, their followers, dazzled by confidence and persuasion, may overlook the signs of incompetence or manipulation. We, as individuals and communities, must become more aware of these psychological drivers. Recognize that behind many foolish acts or reckless policies is a leader swept away by vanity and ignorance. Education, critical thinking, and self-awareness are our best defenses against elevating such individuals to positions of influence. This awareness also demands humility from us. We may be attracted to charismatic personalities, but we must demand substance. We must cultivate an honest relationship with ourselves and with those who seek to lead us, questioning their knowledge, motives, and capacity for true service. In conclusion, ignorance and vanity are not trivial flaws. They are deeply rooted in human psychology and societal structures. When leaders are driven by these traits, they are far more likely to prioritize their ego over the common good. The cycle repeats throughout history, unless we actively work to recognize these traits within ourselves and others. Comment below this sentence. Our society often celebrates appearance and confidence, but true leadership demands humility and wisdom. Share your thoughts on how vanity and ignorance influence leadership today. Machiavelli's wisdom, power beyond virtue. To understand why foolish individuals often ascend to leadership, we must look to one of the most influential political thinkers of all time, Niccolo Machiavelli. His name is synonymous with the stark realism of power politics, and his works reveal truths that many prefer to ignore. Machiavelli's teachings challenge the idealistic notions of virtuous rulers, emphasizing instead that power, at its core, is a game of strategy, deception, and manipulation. Machiavelli famously stated that the end justifies the means, an idea that many interpret as an endorsement of ruthlessness, but in reality, encapsulates a profound understanding of how power operates in the real world. For him, morality and virtue often pale in comparison to the pursuit of stability, control, and influence. Leaders who are driven by idealism or moral purity are often at a disadvantage unless they are also politically astute. Wisdom in Machiavelli's view as the ability to manipulate circumstances, perceptions, and human nature itself. In this context, the question arises, what qualities do leaders who truly succeed possess? Virtue, wisdom, or the ability to manipulate perceptions and exploit human weaknesses? The answer is clear. Machiavelli observed that many leaders who gained and maintained power, regardless of their moral character, were skilled strategists, masters at controlling narratives, engineering alliances, and disarming opposition. Throughout history, we have seen countless examples of leaders who rose to prominence not because they were the most virtuous or knowledgeable, but because they understood how to manipulate the fears, desires, and passions of the masses. These individuals were often astute students of Machiavelli's teachings, whether consciously or unconsciously, knowing that power is rarely seized through kindness or virtue alone, but through calculated moves, deception, and the suppression of opposition. This understanding of power also explains why so many leaders are blind to their own flaws. They operate under an illusion of invincibility, refusing to recognize their limitations or the danger of their own arrogance. Confidence becomes overconfidence. Arrogance becomes a shield that blinds them from reality. By the time their hubris leads to their downfall, the damage is often irreversible. Moreover, Machiavelli emphasized that successful rulers must sometimes act immorally or ruthlessly, because it is better to be feared than loved if one must choose, he wrote, emphasizing that the stability of power often hinges on tough decisions that may go against conventional morality. This cold calculus continues to resonate today. The most brutal and cunning often secure and preserve their dominance, while the virtuous and naive are discarded or manipulated. The lesson here is clear. Leadership rooted solely in virtue or morality is often insufficient in a world that rewards cunning, strategic thinking, and emotional manipulation. Power is fundamentally a game of perception, control, and psychological warfare. The foolish, those who naively believe that goodness or virtue alone can sustain leadership, often fall victim to this brutal reality. In contemporary society, the danger lies in idolizing leaders who appear confident and decisive, ignoring the calculated nature of their actions. Political campaigns, media narratives, and even social media successes reward those who master Machiavellian tactics, those who understand how to craft perceptions, manipulate opinions, and suppress opposition, sometimes at the expense of truth and morality. This analysis reveals a stark truth. Real power seldom conforms to our moral ideals. Instead, it follows a pragmatic, often ruthless logic that favors the cunning over the virtuous. Leaders who understand this and act accordingly often succeed, regardless of their moral standing. Those who fail to grasp it become victims of their own idealism or naivety. The role of society, then, is to be skeptical and discerning, to recognize that appearances can be deceiving and that behind charismatic facades may lie manipulators skilled at controlling the game of power. As we observe the political landscape today, questions must be raised about whether our leaders are virtuous or merely good at Machiavellian tactics. Comment below this sentence. Power is not what it seems. Sometimes it's merely a game of perception and strategy. Share your insights on how Machiavelli's teachings influence modern politics and leadership. Irrational ambition and ignorance. Leading the unsuitable to power. The ascent of foolish individuals into positions of leadership is often characterized by a misguided pursuit of ambition that ignores the fundamental qualities necessary for true governance. This trajectory, built on irrational desire and lacking in awareness, has repeatedly demonstrated its destructive potential throughout history. Ambition, when fueled by ignorance and vanity, becomes a combustible mixture. It pushes individuals beyond their limits, encouraging reckless decisions, hubris, and the belief that they are destined for greatness, regardless of their merit or understanding. In many cases, these individuals are motivated by a desire for recognition, control, or material gain, rather than a genuine commitment to service or progress. Their focus is often inward, on their own ego and perception, rather than on the well-being of society. Often the journey of the foolish towards power begins with small acts of manipulation, populist appeals, or exploiting societal fears. When these leaders sense an environment ripe for their rise, whether due to political instability, social unrest, or economic insecurity, they step into the void, offering simple solutions that appeal to collective ignorance. Their promises are often superficial, their plans incomplete or outright reckless, but their confidence is intoxicating. The danger arises when these leaders succeed, not because they are capable or wise, but because they capitalize on the failures and vulnerabilities of the society, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes intentionally. Their rise is enabled by a populace that, driven by frustration or despair, seeks an easy fix rather than a complex truth. The result is a cycle. Ignorance breeds gullibility, which fuels more ignorance, and the cycle continues. History is littered with examples of this pattern. Leaders who surged to power on a wave of irrational ambition, such as dictators who exploited, nationalist fervor, or populists who manipulated economic fears, have often left devastation in their wake. Their lack of understanding about governance, diplomacy, and social cohesion leads to policies that harm societies more than help them. In many cases, these individuals ignore the importance of knowledge and experience, believing that their charisma alone is enough to lead. This hubris blinds them to the complexities they face, making their decisions impulsive or short-sighted. Their followers, captivated by their confidence, dismiss warnings and expert advice, further deepening societal vulnerabilities. The consequences are grim. Once in power, such leaders often plunge their nations into chaos, wasted resources, ruined institutions, and weakened societal trust. Their reigns are marked by instability, corruption, and ultimately the collapse of their regimes, reflecting the fundamental flaw of leaders who rely on superficial qualities rather than genuine competence. From a societal perspective, this pattern underscores the importance of education and vigilance. Societies that elevate individuals based on superficial qualities rather than merit, knowledge, and true leadership risk long-term damage. The voters and citizens have the responsibility to look beyond charisma and assess the depth of a leader's understanding and integrity. As these leaders cling to power through manipulation, propaganda, and suppression of dissent, societies suffer from a weakened social fabric. Leaders driven by irrational ambition often believe they are invincible, which increases the likelihood of reckless decisions that threaten collective security. In this cycle of ascent, driven by folly, it is vital for us to ask, how can we better educate ourselves and our communities to recognize the signs of irrational ambition? How can we develop resilience against leaders who are driven by ego rather than competence? The answer lies in cultivating a culture of critical thinking, valuing meritocracy, and fostering active engagement in civic life. Comment below this sentence. Irrational ambition and ignorance often lead to chaos. Our role is to recognize and prevent these traits in our leadership. Share your thoughts or experiences regarding leadership that was driven by reckless ambition, how populism fuels the rise of foolish leaders. In the modern political landscape, one of the most insidious mechanisms that lead foolish individuals to power is populism. Populism, when exploited by cunning leaders, becomes an effective tool to manipulate collective ignorance, presenting simple answers to complex problems. This phenomenon has been a recurring theme throughout history, with devastating consequences, and remains highly relevant today. Populism fundamentally appeals to raw emotion rather than rational thought. It simplifies issues into clear victories, or villains, often casting the political opposition as enemies of the people's true interests. Leaders who operate through populism do not rely on nuanced arguments, evidence, or expert consensus. Instead, they craft narratives that resonate emotionally, tapping into fears, frustrations, and insecurities. The danger lies in the fact that populist leaders often exploit societal vulnerabilities, be they economic hardship, cultural fears, or feelings of disenfranchisement. They prey on collective ignorance, convincing large segments of society that their problems can be solved through loyalty, scapegoating, or loud promises. This appeals particularly to those lacking access to accurate information or critical thinking skills. Historically, we have seen populism propel leaders into power who, under the guise of being people's champions, actually serve their own self-interest or the interests of narrow groups. For example, demagogues in various nations exploited economic crises or social upheaval to mobilize mass support, often leading to authoritarian regimes or policies harmful to societal stability. Moreover, populist rhetoric often dismisses facts in favor of emotional appeals. Leaders distort or ignore evidence, framing complex issues in black and white terms that are easy for the masses to digest. Their speeches rely on slogans, appeals to patriotism, or fear-mongering, techniques that bypass rational analysis and manipulate collective sentiment. In many cases, populism creates a false sense of unity, rallying diverse groups around a charismatic figure, but this unity is superficial. It masks underlying societal divides, and when the populist leader's grip weakens or they exit the scene, societies often unravel, revealing the fragility of the consensus built on emotional manipulation rather than factual understanding. Modern examples are evident across the globe, where populist leaders rise to prominence by vilifying opponents, spreading misinformation, and presenting themselves as the only solution to societal ills. Their promises often lack substance, but their mastery over emotional appeals ensures a loyal following. Under this guise, democracy becomes a playground for manipulation, rather than an arena for informed, rational discourse. The core issue is that populism exploits collective ignorance by feeding society's fears and frustrations instead of addressing the root causes. It bypasses critical engagement, creating a passive, obedient audience that accepts simplistic answers and elevates leaders unworthy of their trust. Our societal responsibility is clear. We must resist cultivating a culture that values emotional reaction over rational debate. Education, media literacy, and civic awareness are vital tools to identify and counter populist manipulation. We must challenge easy answers with honest discussions, encourage critical thinking, and demand accountability from our leaders. The lesson from history is that populism's greatest danger is its capacity to temporarily elevate foolish leaders, whose reigns often lead to chaos, tyranny, or societal regression. Recognizing the techniques used to manipulate collective ignorance is our best defense. Comment below this sentence. The rise of populism preys on our collective ignorance. Our task is to cultivate informed and critical societies. Share your observations or experiences with populist leadership and its consequences. The power of misinformation and media manipulation. In today's digital age, the proliferation of misinformation and the strategic use of media tools have dramatically amplified the cycle of ignorance that allows foolish leaders to remain in power. While information should serve as a force for enlightenment, it has instead become a weapon, weaponized to distort reality, manipulate perceptions, and deepen societal divides. The modern world is flooded with information, yet often lacking in truth or context. Social media platforms, algorithms designed to maximize engagement, and disinformation campaigns have created an environment where falsehoods spread rapidly and uncontrollably. It is no longer enough to be ignorant. Now it is easier than ever to become willingly or unwittingly complicit in the spread of misinformation. Misinformation, whether accidental or deliberate, exploits human cognitive biases, confirmation bias, herding behavior, and emotional reasoning. People tend to seek information that confirms their existing beliefs, and social networks reinforce these beliefs by curating content that aligns with individual biases. The result is echo chambers, where false narratives flourish unchecked. Leaders who wish to stay in power understand this dynamic well. They leverage media and misinformation as tools to manipulate public opinion, suppress dissent, and distort facts. Campaigns of disinformation can turn the tide of elections, smear opponents, or manufacture crises that justify authoritarian measures. In this environment, truth becomes a casualty, and ignorance becomes a community norm. The influence of media is not limited to traditional outlets. Social networks like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are powerful engines amplifying false narratives. Algorithms prioritize sensational content, regardless of its factual basis, because this content generates more engagement. As a result, society becomes increasingly misinformed, distrustful, and divided. The consequences are profound. When societies accept misinformation as truth, critical points of failure emerge. Public health crises are exacerbated by false cures, or conspiracy theories. Political polarization deepens and societal cohesion unravels. Leaders who base decisions on distorted facts threaten the very fabric of democracy and social stability. Furthermore, the phenomenon is self-reinforcing. As ignorance spreads, so do the tactics that amplify it. Misinformation campaigns become more sophisticated, often involving bots, fake accounts, and coordinated disinformation operatives aimed at sowing confusion and discord. Counteracting this trend is no small task. It requires a collective effort, promoting media literacy, encouraging critical thinking, and holding social media platforms accountable for the content they promote. An educated populace that questions sources, seeks multiple perspectives, and recognizes fallacies is the best defense against exploitation. There is also a moral responsibility for individuals to take ownership of their information consumption. Rather than passively accepting what is presented, we must actively scrutinize sources, fact-check claims, and remain skeptical of sensational or emotionally charged narratives. Achieving societal change depends on recognizing that the cycle of ignorance is not accidental but often a result of deliberate strategies designed to deepen societal divides and sustain manipulative leadership. Awareness, education, and a culture of curiosity are our best tools to break this cycle. In conclusion, the exploitation and reinforcement of ignorance through media and social networks are among the greatest threats to democracy and social progress. Only through conscious effort, by individuals and systems alike, can we build resilient societies that resist manipulation and promote truth as a foundational value. Comment below this sentence. Our collective ignorance is exploited daily. Our mission is to seek truth and question what we are fed. Share your thoughts or experiences with misinformation and how you approach consuming information responsibly. How we can break the cycle of foolish leadership and ignorance. Recognizing the patterns of foolish leadership driven by ignorance, vanity, and manipulation is only the first step. The true challenge lies in how we, as individuals and communities, can foster meaningful change, building a society where wisdom, integrity, and genuine leadership reign. The foundation of this transformation begins with education. A well-informed populace is resilient against manipulation, capable of critical thinking, and committed to holding leaders accountable. Education should go beyond rote memorization. It must cultivate curiosity, foster skepticism, and develop skills to analyze information critically. This way, people are less likely to accept superficial narratives and more inclined to seek deeper truths. Investing in civic education is equally crucial. Understanding democratic processes, rights, and responsibilities empowers citizens to participate actively in shaping their societies. When people know how decisions are made, the importance of their voice, and their ability to influence change, they become less susceptible to populist and demagogic tactics. But education alone is insufficient. Active civic engagement, voting, participating in community dialogues, and holding leaders accountable creates a robust environment for healthy leadership. Citizens must move beyond passive consumption of information and participate actively in civic life. Civil society organizations, independent media, and grassroots movements play vital roles in scrutinizing power and facilitating dialogue. On an individual level, cultivating personal virtues such as humility, integrity, and curiosity can serve as a counterbalance to the allure of superficial leadership. Leaders are, after all, reflections of the society that elevates them. By promoting integrity and honesty in our daily lives, we set examples for others and gradually shift societal standards. Responsibility also involves challenging narratives based on misinformation and superficiality. When you see manipulative rhetoric or misleading information, speak out by sharing credible sources, engaging in thoughtful debate, or simply encouraging others to think critically. Small actions add up over time and can influence social norms. Furthermore, we must demand accountability from those in positions of power. This includes scrutinizing their decisions, demanding transparency, and actively participating in democratic processes. Elections are a critical moment, but oversight must continue long after the vote. Grassroots activism, advocacy, and community involvement keep leaders grounded in the needs and realities of society. A key component of this transformation is fostering a culture that values wisdom, experience, and moral integrity over superficial qualities. Media outlets, educational institutions, and public figures should champion those who demonstrate true leadership, individuals who prioritize service, knowledge, and ethical behavior. Finally, change begins with us. Each decision to seek truth, to educate ourselves and others, and to participate actively in society contributes to a broader movement against ignorance and foolish leadership. This collective effort can reshape our institutions, inspire new generations, and promote values that transcend superficial charisma and manipulative tactics. The path to a wiser society is long and requires patience, perseverance, and moral courage. But through education, civic participation, and personal virtue, we can cultivate leaders capable of genuine service and foster communities resilient against manipulation. Comment below this sentence. Building a better society starts with personal commitment. Our actions today shape the leadership of tomorrow. Share your ideas or actions you believe can contribute to this change. The future depends on those willing to act now. As we reach the end of this exploration, it becomes clear that the cycle of foolish leaders rising to power, driven by ignorance, vanity, manipulation, and superficiality, is neither an inevitable destiny nor a fixed rule of history. It is a pattern, yes, but one that we hold the power to break. The story of leadership is ultimately a story of us. Our choices, our values, and our courage to stand for truth determine the kind of leaders we elevate and the society we construct. Every time we settle for charismatic superficiality without demanding substance, we perpetuate a system that rewards foolishness over wisdom. Change begins with awareness. Recognizing the flaws in our societal structures and our own tendencies allows us to make conscious decisions. Whether that means voting wisely, educating ourselves, questioning narratives, or uplifting leaders who exemplify true virtue and competence. It also means resisting the allure of easy answers, charismatic demagogues, and populist rhetoric that exploit collective ignorance. The future we want to see is possible only if we are willing to act. This action does not have to be grand. It starts in small, everyday decisions. Supporting independent journalism, promoting civic education, mentoring others in critical thinking, and participating actively in community dialogue are all steps toward a more enlightened society. Moreover, it is essential that we foster a culture that values integrity, humility, and genuine service. Leaders who embody these qualities are born from societies that challenge superficiality and demand responsibility from their representatives. We can influence this culture through our example, our words, and our votes. The power of collective action is profound. When enough of us commit to seeking truth and accountability, it shifts the very fabric of society. Let us remember that history rewards those who nurture wisdom and integrity, not those who rely solely on superficial charm or ruthless manipulation. The cycle can be broken, but it requires the active participation of individuals who are willing to stand for what is right, even in the face of complacency or intimidation. This is a call to everyone reading this. Becoming aware is only the beginning. The true challenge is to act with perseverance and courage. We must educate ourselves and others, challenge injustice, hold leaders accountable, and advocate for a society where wisdom outshines vanity. The future depends on us, on those willing to see beyond illusions and fight for a society built on truth, virtue, and genuine leadership. The narrative is ours to write. Comment below this sentence. The future is shaped by those willing to act today. Share your commitment to creating a wiser society. Share your final thoughts or your plans for contributing to this change.